Monster Slaying has been updated. Got new numbers.
Eight monsters.
Check them out.
Yeah. My career as a mercenary is off to a good start.
I still want to know how they figured it out. Is it like automatic? Is it omnipotent? Does it just know?
I don't know for sure. Maybe they have security cameras, and there's nothing to say that they don't. They do have like TVs and stuff in this world.
That's true.
I realized something the other day, that there is in fact television in the world of Kingdom Hearts, because in the first game you go into the Dalmatians' house, and it's based off of their house from the 101 Dalmatians, and there's an old TV in the corner in one of those rooms. So TV exists on Traverse Town in Kingdom Hearts.
What does it play, I wonder?
I don't know.
What kind of programming is there?
Who knows for sure?
Different frequencies of static.
all the broadcasting worlds were destroyed by the Heartless. Anyway, glad we started this off with a Kingdom Hearts talk. as we are back here in the in Seventh Heaven, as I teased at the ending of the last episode, we're not going to make much progress in Final Fantasy VII today. I will have, by the time that this series actually comes out, I'll have made a little kind of episode 0 giving a little bit of background information about this game, about the original game, and talking about some of its systems for the super duper uninitiated. But in today's episode, we're going to do a bit more of we're going to take a little bit of a look back to the past of the Final Fantasy series in general, maybe for people who are unfamiliar with it beyond Final Fantasy VII, or maybe like an Aidan who's unfamiliar with it beyond Kingdom Hearts and listening to me talk about a bunch of nonsense. This may wind up being a little bit awkward, because when I cut this like 2 years ago, I had a pretty solid idea in my head of what I was going to talk about, and now it's been a long time. But anyway,
it's fine, just freeball it.
It's true. The main thing to know is the Final Fantasy series has been around since the 80s. It started out on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Famicom in Japan. And there's been an urban legend forever that it was called Final Fantasy specifically because they thought it would be the last game that particular team got to make. The guy who directed it, Hironobu Sakaguchi, who was the director of the first 5 games in the series and was like the main series overall, like not directing the games. He was like the series director until he left the company in the mid-aughts. He was going to leave game development and go back to university if the game wasn't a success, but the name was inconsequential. They wanted something with a clean FF abbreviation, in Japanese with a nice sounding efu as the abbreviation. So anything fantasy really would have worked. He said that in an interview a couple of years ago, finally addressed the rumors swirling around that. Mm-hmm. But every entry in the series, it's an anthology series, and they were all kind of doing different things. There are reoccurring elements, reoccurring monsters, reoccurring musical themes, but they are all trying to do different things, and all trying to do different things from a story standpoint and a gameplay standpoint. The very first game was in many ways, at the time in Japan, it was kind of seen as a Dragon Quest ripoff, honestly. It did some things that were different. For example, in a lot of RPGs like this at the time, you wouldn't be able to customize a team the way that you are right here. You wouldn't put together a team of fighters, and even more so than that, when you were actually in combat, you wouldn't see your own characters, as we're going to see in a second here. But Final Fantasy was largely inspired by a lot of Japanese game developers were getting their hands on Western role-playing games that were on PCs at the time, or they were even importing Dungeons and Dragons sets, and they were basically trying to adapt, interactive, video gamey, single-player versions of that kind of stuff. But as you can see here, all of the characters are actually displayed on the right-hand side of the screen, and they have kind of light animations, so them interacting with the systems. Stuff like Dragon Quest and even Western PC games like Wizardry tended to have just the enemy on screen and then text representation of what you were doing. So even as weird as it may sound to say pointing at this, early on they were making strides toward a cinematic presentation that other stuff in their contemporaries weren't, I guess you would say.
And you gotta start somewhere.
Final Fantasy II. A particularly infamous game.
Oh, is this the one where you can level up by beating yourself up?
Oh yeah. So this one is interesting because the previous game was very much a generic Dungeons and Dragons campaign. You would name your own characters. There wasn't much of a story beyond go around, beat some monsters, and then beat the final boss. This one had named characters and an overarching narrative, not a terribly complicated one, but it was striving for something. But yeah, the main thing this is remembered for today is having absolutely bonkers systems where you could upgrade your own character's defense and attack stats by attacking each other and healing each other continually. It was interesting, but you could break the game very easily. Some people liked that, some people didn't. Final Fantasy III is, among many things, in my opinion, it's where the music for the series got really good. Even on the NES, the themes for this game were phenomenal. But this one did a lot of interesting stuff that was going to last for the rest of the series. The story wasn't quite as specific as FF2's. It was kind of back to a broader thing, but it did have some...
That animation's wonderful.
That animation for the chocobo running around is
that
wonderful.
our first chocobo
That's
there?
I think chocobos were introduced in 2. We'll talk about that in a minute,
Okay.
but yeah, you saw one there. There was a lot of interesting narrative stuff going on in this one. There were a lot of interesting gameplay systems introduced here that I'll be able to talk about slightly easier in a second. This game basically introduced the job system as the series would come to consider it, but I'll talk about that. That's easier to explain when we get to 5 in just a moment here. That was the last game on the NES. And while, again, like I said, even though without the hardware upgrade, I think like the music and a bunch of other stuff in that game was a big leap over the previous 2 games, 4 on the Super Nintendo was an even bigger leap. This one made serious strides in presentation, and this is the first time where I would say the narrative content of the game was the primary focus. That was what they really wanted you to engage with here. You've got a bunch of, I mean, obviously you can rename the characters if you want to, but it's got a bunch of named characters who have set personalities, who have set backstories, who have set relationships with one another, specific character arcs that they go through. This has and also a quite large cast of playable characters and supporting characters that all go through this really big, you could say generously operatic, you could say ungenerously melodramatic narrative. Going back to FF4 today is a little bit difficult because, it might be to some people, because it is, it's really kind of all over the place in terms of its tone. But for the time, it was like, this was, so you may have seen up in the corner with dates being shown. Final Fantasies 2 and 3 didn't release in the States because the localization took too long. By the time they would have been coming out, the SNES was out. They just prioritized this game.
Yeah.
But be it Japan or anywhere else, this game was one of the first times that people popped the game in and there were this many words. There were these many characters who actually had feelings and things that they thought and went through changes as things went on. This was a big moment for a lot of people of realizing, wow, video games can really like tell big stories and have characters with big personalities in them. The big personalities also come through in gameplay because unlike the previous games where you had some ability to customize stuff, every character has very specific roles. Right here's a pretty famous moment where when one of the characters goes through a big character arc moment, their role in the game and their abilities literally change completely permanently for the rest of the game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you do get to compose teams in this of the characters that you want to have in your lineup, but like that character's a wizard, that character's a healer, that character's a bard, that character's a dragoon, and that's what they're kind of set to.
Okay.
They have their combat role and their design and their personality are all tied into one continuous unit.
Okay.
Which is not the case with Final Fantasy V.
That's a good title screen.
Yeah.
Phenomenal title screen. Final Fantasy V is another one that didn't release in the States for a very long time until much later on. This one, people tend to think of it, even though it has a big sweeping story, it doesn't take it's fairly comedic. I mean, all the Final Fantasy games are trying to be comedic, but this one is getting kind of playful with its own tropes and the structure and the expectation of the series.
That's wicked looking.
And the main thing that it's doing that people love it for are its gameplay systems. So Final Fantasy III introduced it. This game expanded upon it, where you can select dozens of different roles that each of the characters can have. Now, the characters have their own personalities, and they talk certain ways in cutscenes, but you can make them a knight, a thief, a black mage, a white mage, a summoner, whatever. And each of these different jobs have different abilities, and as you level up, you're not only leveling up the overall character, but their classification within that job. And once you get a high enough level within a job, you can retain some of those abilities. And you can start mixing and matching abilities on one character and have them pulling abilities from like 2 or 3 jobs at once and building really complex teams with really complex matchups of abilities.
Okay.
And that kind of character customization stuff is only in some of the games, but that's the thing, is that they kind of go back and forth between stuff like a 4, where the character's roles are very defined by the story, or a 5, where they're highly customizable. Or, in the case of this game, back around to the character's roles being defined by their participation in the story. Ignore the part where it says 3!
It's very easy to keep up with.
Yeah, not convoluted at all.
If you were to buy the re-releases of this these days, it says 6, even in states. But yeah, back when it came out in America, like I said, 2 and 3 never came out, and 5 just didn't happen fast enough, so they moved on to this one. Which I don't want to say right choice or wrong choice, but in terms of the games that are going to have the potential highest impact, Final Fantasy VI still tends to crack a lot of greatest games of all time lists these days.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
And I mean, you can tell this is the title screen of the game. This is the title screen of the 1994 NES game that a Super Nintendo game that you're looking at right now.
Okay.
That was what the game looked like when you stuck it into your Super Nintendo back in the day. That was the first thing you saw, that storm panning down to the title screen with that music.
Wow.
And then after an initial cutscene, the opening credits are this Mode 7 scene of some soldiers in walking tanks moving to attack a town. And this goes on with the theme playing over it for quite some time. This game was all the games in the series have been big leaps over the previous ones in terms of presentation. This one was massive, and people still talk about the stuff that it achieved to this day. And unlike the previous ones where I could talk about 4 being a bit melodramatic, this one has comedy in it, it has melodrama in it still, but it is, let's just say, very thematically rich. It's got a lot going on, it's got a lot of characters, and it's got a very interesting tone and a very interesting setting. All the games prior to this one had been primarily traditional fantasy D&D type settings. You're obviously already seeing kind of a mixing of aesthetics just in the stuff that I'm showing you here. This one is borderline steampunkish. It's a world where magic is believed to be extinct, and it's only just kind of coming back as part of the story. And it is this is the fan favorite. This is a very well. Everybody has different favorites, but this is one of the best liked in the entire series. It has musical numbers on the Super Nintendo. That musical number's awesome, by the way.
It's the best
You were telling me about that the other day.
It's the best scene in gaming.
Thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyway, it's not all just drama, though. There is combat in this one as well. And like I said, this one has all of the characters assigned to roles based upon their existing character archetypes.
Do I spy an ATB gauge?
Yes, you spy an ATB gauge. So you can see down those in the corner during combat, you can see gauges filling up next to all the characters' names, and that indicates the attack order. That's what we were talking about a little bit earlier. The ATB in Final Fantasy VII Remake here is something that charges and gives you the ability to use special abilities. In these games, it just determines your ability to attack, and there are invisible meters like that for the enemies as well.
Okay.
You had to show it.
You have to include it.
You have to include suplexing the train.
That character has a lot of different martial abilities that can perform, and there's certain abilities that aren't supposed to be performed on certain enemies, but just for whatever reason, they forgot to program in that train should be immune to the suplex ability, and they've never removed it because it became so iconic that he could suplex. Because that scene is already so silly. They're running away from a train and fighting it at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like deliberately comedic. That's something important. That's important to understand. These games want to be funny sometimes.
Right.
A lot of the time, honestly. But the fact that you could pick up the train, suplex it, and then it would flip back over and continue on the tracks and keep chasing you.
Honestly, even with my limited knowledge, I've seen a lot of stupid things like that in the games that make me laugh. Like there's a GIF that I always come back to from Final Fantasy X where There's a big old like giant worm, and Oron just like baseball bat swings it, into
And
the
it
sunset.
flies off the
Oh
map.
my
Yeah.
God.
Flies into the sun.
Yeah, he has a move that can instantly remove enemies from the battlefield if they hit, and he hits an enemy that you would think would be immune to it because it's the size of
Huge.
5 school buses.
Very good.
But he hits it fine, and it just whoo, Team
Oh
Rocket
my
blasts off
gosh.
again. There's actually there's a really phenomenal YouTube channel called Resonant Arc that does like a storytelling analysis in video games. And they're currently doing a long-form podcast discussion series of the narrative and presentation of Final Fantasy VI.
Okay.
Which I recommend people listen to even if you're not familiar with the game. They all their podcasts are designed as book clubs, where they'll say, like, you know, on the next episode, we will get to this point. So watch or play that far,
Okay.
so you don't
That's cool.
spoil anything. Yeah. And their first episode will usually be about, like, development history and talking about key staff who worked on it and things like that.
Interesting.
It's very cool. But listening to them talk about 6 has been interesting. They've been talking a lot about how its presentation style is more theatrical than filmic. Since it's all in text boxes and the little sprites have to emote big to get points across, and the lines don't read the way they might work in like a film setting, but they work well. They would
Right.
work well in a stage setting, perhaps.
Okay.
And a lot of stuff that again is like deliberate jokes. One thing they highlight is there's a part where after a fairly like the scene Joshua was saying a second ago, one of the best scenes in gaming. After a musical number that is meant to be, it is an in-universe musical number where a character is forced through a contrived set of circumstances to participate undercover in an opera. It makes sense in context, I swear. And the
Okay.
musical number winds up containing a lot of subtext about this character's personal arc and her relationship to another character.
Oh, perfect.
Then a comedy monster shows up and decides they're going to ruin the play by dropping an anvil onto the stage from the rafters. And the monster is pushing the anvil and says, "Darn, this is really heavy. It's going to take me 5 minutes to push this off of the scaffolding." And then a timer appears. You have 5 minutes to get up there and stop it.
Oh my gosh.
And it contains a lot of stuff like that. They're very knowing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of stuff in this game, even here in Remake, people might look at it and go like, is this awkward or is this meant to be funny? I'm not going to tell you there's no cringe. I'm not going to tell you there isn't some stuff that just doesn't quite land.
Right.
But stuff like the team on the platform going, "Yeah, we did it. We blew up the reactor. Guys, shut up. People are listening." That's supposed to be funny.
Okay.
That's at least I think so, because
Yeah.
there's stuff like that in the other games that's I'm pretty sure
yeah.
definitely meant to be funny.
I laughed, and that's what's important.
Yeah.
Stop gatekeeping my sense of humor. So one thing that is hard to talk about without like going and listening to a lot of stuff is reoccurring music. Reoccurring monsters show up, spells tend to be named the same. There are other elements that are similar, but a lot of music tends to reoccur throughout the series. For example,
Oh, yeah.
ever since the first game, we have this prelude theme. This tends to wind up playing on main menus or over opening credits, stuff like that. Obviously, it's called the prelude. It plays at the beginning typically. Though
Okay.
you'll often hear that you'll often hear it mixed into other stuff. Soken, the composer on FF14, loves hiding the prelude all over the place in random songs
Very
in that
good.
soundtrack. And what's interesting with listening to the soundtracks of the series is hearing how themes tend to evolve and be reinterpreted as hardware changes and as composers change. So this is still Nobu Uematsu, who is the composer for the original Final Fantasy and remained the main composer for the series up until 10. So this is him still writing it, but now working on the Super Nintendo instead of the original Nintendo Entertainment System. And it's interesting to hear him reinterpret himself and work with different technology over the years.
God, I love the Super Nintendo sound chip. Like, not even just nostalgia, it's like God.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Juicy.
The people who knew how to make it
Yeah,
sing
well,
did
of
very
course.
good work with it.
Of course, that's what I'm referring
Yeah.
to.
And we heard the Final Fantasy VII Prelude, the remake version of it, on the main menu when we were talking at the beginning of the first episode. The one in Remake is a pretty faithful representation of the version from the PlayStation version. It kind of swells as it goes on in a pretty big way. And I mentioned that the one we picked up from the store in the last episode sounds a little bit like the interpretation from 10, which is like bordering on EDM.
When did this play in 10? This wasn't main menu,
This
was
plays in the very first scene when kids are saying, Titus, sign my blitzball, sign my blitzball, and you have to and you pick Titus's name.
it? Excellent.
It might play in a few other spots, but I'm not sure. And this has become basically the main series theme as time's gone on.
Uh-huh.
And I like highlighting 4s. Again, this is the Super Nintendo, and this is the same composer, but just with a few more tools. He adds this intro. And the idea of what the instruments are supposed to be and those cymbal clashes are much clearer now, obviously. And what's neat about this is that the theme from 4, which is from like, I think 91, 92,
Okay.
the interpretation of it that's right there is basically what orchestras play now.
Wow.
This is technically an arrangement by Hitoshi Sakamoto, who did most of the score for Final Fantasy XII.
Okay.
But this is about the way it sounds in orchestras that Nobuo Uematsu has worked on, or stuff like that. This is basically the sound of what it sounds like now, unless someone's getting funky with it.
Yeah.
This is another one where you will hear elements of this theme slipped into other tracks a lot.
Okay.
And some games, some of these themes don't even show up. Like in the original Final Fantasy VII, the main franchise theme doesn't play until the end credits.
Perfect.
And this is one that a lot of people have heard,
Yeah.
just in random contexts, all over the place on the internet. The victory fanfare for just finishing a standard encounter in these games. It's a pretty famous jingle at this point.
I mean, before I knew anything Final Fantasy, I knew this jingle.
Because it's pretty common just in other, like, even non-gaming content. It winds up popping up in YouTube videos.
I think that's the version I've heard. Which makes... No, it's not the one we're playing. Never mind.
So one thing that's interesting is you'll notice that there's that initial ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, and then it moves into this, and that kind of loops. So what the games will often do is they'll keep the intro, and then what it goes into afterwards will sometimes change on a game-by-game basis. So there is kind of a core theme, which is what you heard in those first two, but then
Yeah.
other games decide to reinterpret this back part. So
Okay.
this is how it sounds in 7. Chocobos. The horses don't exist in Final Fantasy. Horses aren't
Who
real.
needs
Just
them?
like H-Bomber guys said, horses are made up. Everybody rides bipedal, massive walking chickens in the Final Fantasy series. The Chocobo theme was introduced in 2, but it's pretty short. It looped pretty quickly. They added another section to it in 4 and fleshed it out a bit, and that's kind of the form that it took after that. So this is where it would have looped in 2, but then they added this. And this is one, I would say that of all of these themes, this is the one the composers tend to get the most playful with.
Oh, I think you've played this
sure.
one for me.
Well, technically I played it for you 2 years ago when we tried to record this episode
yeah.
the first time, but I may have played it for you separately.
Maybe it just like stands out in my memory.
It's
more.
certainly possible.
Yeah, I've had
It's
several
quite
times where I
stylized.
hear one of these themes, in the beginning of it, I'm like, what is this song? And then it's like, oh, it's the Chocobo. It goes into that.
I could have been, I already trimmed this episode down a little bit from what it was. I could have gone really nuts and included a lot of variations of the Chocobo theme, including but not limited to the one from 13.2 that everybody knows.
Are you telling me you didn't include that?
I didn't, but
You're
I put
such a cow.
but I put this one in from actual 13.
Well, this one sounds good though.
It does sound good.
You should have put the other
Should have
one.
put the trash in.
Wanna ride my Chocobo?
Saddle up if you think you can ride in this rodeo. Just look up Metal Chocobo Final Fantasy 13-2, folks. You'll find it.
No, I don't think I will.
You won't regret it.
Yeah, not only do the composers and not only does that one go on to getting remixed a lot, like Final Fantasy VII has like 4 different versions of the Chocobo theme. There's a lot. That one just shows up in a lot of different places.
Very good.
There's also a version of the Posted Chocobo that we just heard from 13 with lyrics. I like it. I like it with it's just jazzy, but the one version with lyrics is kind of weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So we just talked about broader series history, and we looked at the first 6 games in the series. However, I did mention we might take a look at what the original PlayStation version of Final Fantasy VII was like.
Oh yeah.
And we're going to do just that.
Perfect.
More like Gay Station.
I don't have
Xbox is where it's at.
I have no nostalgia for the original PlayStation. I really don't. I mean, I've talked about it before. I don't have a lot of nostalgia for things in general. That startup sound is...
It's the best.
It's top 5
so
of all
good.
time. Anyway.
I'm
And
still
also,
very
this main
partial to the
menu is top
GameCube.
5 of all time.
Oh, I love the opening of the GameCube as well.
GameCube opening
yeah.
is superior.
That title card's great. There is an opening credits sequence that will play when you boot the game and if you let it linger, but that completely static, no sound, sword in the ground, darkness, new game or continue, I think is... I think it's cool. It's not an opinion that it's iconic. It's just people know it. And though they kept music on the menu for this one, obviously they
and
kept
it's fact.
Yep, exactly. It's,
No cap.
It's Kino and it's based. So unlike the remake, which they did all those sweeping shots of the entire city, this one starts with droning, low sound, and a star field, which is quite different. And some people would say it goes on for too long, but I think it's good. I think it's like, what am I getting into here? What am I looking at? And then we fade in on this lady.
Oh yeah, looking at the pipe leaking.
Mm-hmm.
And not spooked.
Well, their options for physical acting are really limited, so to be able to convey stuff like that would have been difficult, even if they wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, when she stands up from kneeling, she's not standing up from kneeling, because she didn't have the points of articulation to allow her to do that. Her legs are presumably clipping through the floor,
Very good.
and she rises up.
Got it. Yet again, did not get jump scared. I've gotten
Don't worry
over
about
it. I've gotten desensitized to it.
This time.
Yeah, you lose all of the other shots of establishing life in this place, but you still get a composite image of it. And it's worth remembering this was at the time one of the most expensive video games ever made, and there's going to be a hell of a lot more movies of equivalent quality to the one we just saw, of lower quality than the one that we just saw. They have a lot of stuff to present. The FMVs in this game, full motion videos,
Yeah.
where it's actually a video file and not what we're seeing here, 3D models being manipulated according to a script against a pre-rendered background. The pre-rendered movies tend to fluctuate a bit in terms of model and animation quality. I guess it doesn't matter once they're saved files; they're going to take up the same amount of space. But even just the
Yeah.
work that it took for the animators to put them together.
Yeah.
Because this game was made in like 2 years, I think, or something like that, which is ludicrous. I don't know how they did it, other than the fact that they slept at the office and didn't take weekends, because there is that. But anyway, yeah, as we can see, we've got the time meter down there in the corner, and when that fills up, then options pop up for us to be able to select attacks. But just like with Remake, 2 guards confront us first thing in the little entrance to the station, and we take them out very easily. And since we have not been given the opportunity to name Cloud yet, he's still just called ex-soldier, because in these classic FF games where there was voice acting, you could name the party members whatever you wanted to.
Okay.
So you could name them. You could name them after yourself.
Could name them Cool Ranch 420 if you wanted.
Name them whatever you wanted to. You could name Cloud Sephiroth, and things could get really confusing.
They get very funny.
Only you can save the world, Dennis. That's me. While 3D home consoles had existed for a little bit, none of them were good. But even then, like, this was still relatively early technology. It's interesting to see even like 1 year later they released something like Parasite Eve. 2 years later they released FF8, and both of those games have characters with, I'm gonna say, more realistic human proportions. They don't look real, but they have real human proportions. It's hard to say if the polygon characters here are, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say hard to say. I think it might not even be as much of a technology choice as some people might assume, and more of a style choice, because the sprites in the previous Final Fantasy games had been that kind of chibi style, and we're essentially continuing to represent that here, except for some of the high-fidelity full motion video sequences. I think they probably could have made different models if they wanted to, but I don't know, maybe because there are higher resolution models in the battles, as we saw a second ago.
Yeah.
In fact, it's worth noting, in any given battle, there are technically way more polygons on screen anyway, because during the battles, they are in a 3D environment. It's being rendered in real time, whereas anytime they're in the field, they're against a pre-rendered still image JPEG background.
Interesting.
So the processing power being used, like, it's not like, oh, there's more processing power being used in the map, so they need the lower poly character models. So I'm pretty sure it was a deliberate artistic choice.
Interesting.
I don't know if I've ever read anything to confirm that or not.
But it sounds good. It sounds correct.
But you did see there just a second ago, we went from a pre-rendered background, it transitioned directly into an FMV video of zooming in and then panning up, right?
Yeah.
Because right now, that's not a 3D environment. That is an image with different layering over it, so that Cloud can go behind a rail or behind a building or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's technically just an image file that then we are manipulating a 3D model around on, and the camera's shifting relative to our position.
Right.
A lot of these interactions are pretty similar to how they wound up being in Remake. They kept them pretty close. As discussed previously, the localization for Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1 got a little bit scuffed. There's some awkward stuff in here. We're not going to see a lot of really crazy stuff, but even just some of like the exchanges here is like, it's like Barrett's responding almost like to things that Cloud isn't saying.
Yeah.
Probably because the guy who was doing the localization was localizing Cloud's lines and Barrett's lines completely separately with no context from a spreadsheet.
Perfect.
Yeah. I love code deciphered. He presses a button.
That's what I'm gonna start doing when I'm on an elevator.
Code deciphered.
I'm in.
Everybody else got to say it. Think of how many people risk their lives just for this code. Why'd you need to decipher it if you had the code then?
Asking real questions.
I know.
That is a great looking elevator.
Little by little, the reactors will drain out all the life, and that'll be that. It's not my problem.
What the hell did you say?
Yeah, I know. Joey, the planet's dying, Cloud. That's the iconic line. That's what everybody whips out as the easy thing. Gotta go play FF7. Planet's dying, Cloud. Only thing I care about is finishing this job before security and the robo-guards come. I'm not sure they ever use the expression robo-guards for the rest of the game.
Very good.
But yeah, as Joey points out, the design of this elevator, obviously the one in the remake, was much cleaner. And there are some designs like that did get cleaned up a little bit in Remake, but then as stated, there are also a lot of weird designs that stayed as weird or even got weirder.
Okay, perfect.
So it's hard to say what, where they made certain choices and where they didn't. You know, I don't know. In some areas, it might just be that, you know, they're making a really big game and it's harder to make a fully rendered 3D space and a lot of them than it is to make it pre-rendered backgrounds, even though that was hard too. So
Yeah.
maybe in some places they just had to cut corners and make that elevator simple and not have it be full of all kinds of weird cyberpunk crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see the floating eyeballs that you commented on
Oh, yeah.
previously as the weird enemies. What are these? Well, there they are in 1997.
Boy, does this game have some weird enemies.
And here's the weird frog guy that we were like, surely that dude won't just come over and still be in his weird frog stance, and he was. Surely the sweeper, the robot with the weird little Lego cone feet, surely he'll look a little bit different. Nope,
No.
exactly the same.
And it's so good. It's glorious.
So here, the only special abilities you have are things that are equipped by materia. You know, you're not building up the ATB gauge to perform special moves like we were
Right.
seeing before.
Right.
So right now, Cloud's Limit Break is just Braver, which, as you saw, is his standard attack ability with ATB gauge in Remake.
Okay.
The Limit Break you saw him use previously, Cross Slash, that I was using in Remake, that is a Limit Break you unlock much later in the game.
Okay.
In the original game. You're also going to see Barrett perform a move called Big Shot, which is his limit break. And while technically his limit break in Remake looks very similar to the limit break you're going to see here, it's also very clear that it's like, you know, focused shot and overcharge are like, they're visually, they're kind of doing the same thing, you know? Anyway, just to give a
They
quick
didn't
look.
keep it Big Shot, which is very disappointing.
Just to take a quick look at what the menus look like in this game. You can see materia slots on the weapons down there.
Okay.
Barrett's is currently empty, but Cloud had two little green apple little candies there.
Okay.
We blow this place, ain't gonna be nothing more than a hunk of junk. The localization gentleman decided that Barrett was gonna be Mr. T in the localization in the original localization.
Just do it.
A lot of people have a soft spot for how he's delivered in this game, and I honestly think that the remake still captures. I mean, it still captures the energy, and certainly it's not like Barrett's completely different in English than he was in Japanese. It's
Right.
like, it's minor differences that turbo nerds would get really hung up over. There is a really good, if anybody cares to and doesn't care about spoilers, because you will get spoiled if you go watch this. Tim Rogers, while he was still with Kotaku, did a series of videos where he went through like the first half of the game in Japanese and English, not like as a playthrough. It was an edited, scripted video where he
Okay.
talked about localization changes.
Okay.
His words that he begins many of the episodes with: I'm playing through in English and Japanese and noticing a trillion little differences. I'd like to share 1 billion of them with you, but I only have time to share 1 million. So he's not talking about everything. He just highlights some stuff that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, if you're familiar with the original game and you don't need to worry about spoilers and you'd like to see some stuff that got kind of scrambled in the localization, and might make you appreciate some of the stuff that's going on in Remake even, with the way they
Yeah.
kind of have managed to keep some aspects of the original English, but also air closer to the Japanese in spots, go give it a look. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Now here's an example of localization. Barrett, be careful. Attack while the tail's up. Oh, okay, I'll attack then. It's gonna counterattack with its laser. What it's trying to say is, if you attack while the tail is up, it will counterattack. If you attack it while its tail is up, it will perform a move that does like 200 damage and has a good chance of wiping your team.
Great.
Oh, it doesn't do that much damage. I feel like it did more than that. Maybe I'm crazy. That is,
Maybe
but
you're
that's
just really good
that's
at it.
known as like a thing that wipes people who don't know what they're doing early game.
Okay.
That it winds up hitting. They wind up attacking it while the tail is up and then
Big
getting
shot.
hit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know that you can take.
Too many more of those hits.
Yeah.
If you weren't being smart about it. I thought it did more damage than that, but oh well. I inflated it in my memory. It's no big deal. But yeah, that's an example right up front. The game is trying to tell you, if you attack it while the tail is up, it's going to counterattack.
Yeah.
Oops. Don't worry about it, though.
It's trial by fire. It's filtering those with bad reading comprehension.
Exactly. and good critical thinking skills.
Exactly.
What's really weird is this game, and also Jessie gets stuck and you have to help her up in both versions of the game. What's really weird is that several of the Final Fantasy games start out with a boss that has a phase in which it's like, don't attack it right now or it'll launch a devastating counterattack. And then no bosses later in the game ever do that. It's like trying to teach you to pay attention to cues and like, no, you can't just select attack all the time.
Okay.
But like, it's not quite teaching you the right lesson because you'll never fight a boss like that ever again. It's funny. 4 has that. I know 6 has that. 5 might have it, but I'm not 100% sure.
And it's kind of a shame because it really actually lets you mess around with the ATB system.
It does, yeah. Anyway, that should keep the planet going at least a little longer. The ATB system, I feel like, has never really been maximized. Most of the time, it's just a way to put a timer. It's basically just playing speed chess where the enemy can take it, where like, the other side can take a turn before you can if you think about your turn for too long.
Yeah.
I generally find it translates to you're kind of playing an action game with bad UI because it removes, like, okay, if a turn-based, the advantage of the turn-based game is either that it's a chill experience or that it's a highly tactical experience, and if you put that timer on it, you can't usually be tactical, and it can't be super chill.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not bad. It's just, I think it's not, maybe not the best in the world. But hey, it worked for a little while there. Well, speed right off. Give us about your money. Save it till we're back at the hideout. Okay, Barrett. See you later. Back at the hideout. You can see, you know, a bit more what the model actually looks like there. Weird one is if you go and get this on your PlayStation 4, or Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, or PC now, all the characters will have mouths. And there's the Loveless poster, by the way. And like I said, it's just an image that shows up early in the game, and for whatever reason, it's stuck with fans.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you're pointing that out because I'd seen the mouths and there was something in the back of my mind, I was like, something's off.
The Flower Girl does get knocked over by some guys stampeding by, which kind of compensates for somebody. You know, in the full opening cutscene in the original, in the remake, somebody knocks her over and she's picking up some flowers.
Yeah.
You like them? They're only a gill. We tried to give her 2 in the remake, and she was like,
No.
"What do you mean, you cheapskate?" Damn, inflation.
That's exactly what I was
That's
about to say.
crazy.
In this, 1 flower in this economy? Gee willikers.
Of course, we really don't know what 1 gill is worth, right?
Yeah.
So, so what I was gonna say is that all the characters just have like a single like black line for a mouth in later releases. Mako energy doesn't last forever. Mako's the planet's life source. The end is in sight. Protectors of the planet. Avalanche. There's some graffiti on the wall, they were saying.
Perfect.
Don't believe Shinra's lies. You can stop and fight these guys here if you want to. You can get into an encounter, but it doesn't matter. You can also just say, I'm out of here.
Very good.
As you can see there, Cloud's kind of more like a Lego person instead of the fully realized, like, kind of human anatomy version we saw of Aerith in the opening cutscene.
Right,
I keep
right.
fluctuating between calling her Aerith and Flower Girl. I don't think it's a spoiler to say she's going to show up again and that I know her
No.
name.
Absolutely not.
Anyway, but the mouths were in the code for the PlayStation 1 game, but for whatever reason at the last minute they just decided they don't look good and they removed them.
Yeah.
In the not good, very bad 1998 or 1999 PC port of this
No.
game, the mouths were back in, along with a MIDI soundtrack that did not use the PS1 soundboard because PCs didn't have the PS1 soundboard, and it sounds awful.
Yuck.
Gross. But
Yeah.
and then while the soundtrack stuff is fixed in more recent releases, the mouths tended to be added back in unless you are directly emulating the PS1 experience. Which here we are playing a digital version of the PS1 game on a PlayStation 3. That's where I got the footage from, which is the same way that I did the playthrough with Joey a decade ago. God.
So long ago.
Oh no.
Wild.
It wasn't quite a decade.
It's getting close.
It was like 8.5 years.
It's getting close.
You're getting really close.
It'll be a decade by the time this video's out.
Exactly.
Are you feeling pretty tired? Shouldn't you take a break?
Come waltzing in here making a big scene.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. Just what I always do. Shit! What did the translator mean by that? Having everyone worried that you don't give a damn about no one but yourself. And then he gives his shrug. You were worried about me. What? I'm taking it out of your money, hot stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Why doesn't he call him hot stuff in the remake?
Wake up. We're moving out. Follow me.
Why doesn't he have like? Does he have accessory? I guess probably just the Would that be a polygon? I'm trying.
These are polygonal figures.
Well, no, but I mean having an extra thing for like a necklace. Because does he not have a necklace in the?
He has what is he wearing?
I didn't feel like we had that skin there.
Yeah, he's not bare skinned in the remake. Though if you look at art of him, like concept art of him for this game, he does have he's just wearing a jacket with torn off sleeves and a bare chest.
Okay.
So Tetsuya Nomura did the character design for this game. He had previously been a monster designer for the series, and he had designed a couple of characters for FF6, and he had been involved in some of the scenario development stuff.
Okay.
On this game, Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of the series, was not the game director for the first time. He was instead the lead producer. But he and Tetsuya Nomura were the main guys who were brainstorming the overall story before handing it over to a team of writers and Yoshinori Kitase, who was the director of the game.
Perfect.
And Tetsuya Nomura was selected to be the lead character designer on this game for a couple of reasons, but one of them being that he was well known within the office at the time for, in addition to like the monster designs that he would do that would be meant to look kind of artsy the way that the sprites tend to represent them in the older games, he would do very manga-esque drawings and manga costume character designs and chibi designs. And it was decided that his layouts would probably look really good, would read really, really well for these models.
Okay.
Which is part of why Cloud looks the way that he does too. In concept art, Cloud's the soldier uniform is black. In battle, the soldier uniform is black.
Yeah.
On the field, it's purple because it makes him easier to see. In the battle render, his hair isn't quite that spiky. In some of the art, his hair isn't quite that spiky. On the map, it's that spiky. So you always know where he is. Yeah.
Okay. I had noticed that on the screen, it looks like he's got like a safety cone coming out of his head.
Yeah, Stop acting like a damn kid. Sit down and shut up. I love the translator's use of apostrophes in this game. It's phenomenal. Want to look at this with me? I don't have much of a choice. This is how to progress the game. I'll explain it to you. I like this kind of stuff. Bombs and monitors, flashy stuff.
Wow.
Great stuff.
That's a good line.
Phenomenal. Okay, it's about to start. This is a complete model of the city of Midgar. Like I said, we saw this in the remake, and it's pretty much exactly this.
Yeah.
So we talked about this off screen. We didn't wind up talking about it on mic. We've obviously just in the first chunk of this game, we've already observed some changes.
Yes.
For example, we do not observe Shinra upper level guys orchestrating a false flag operation based around our attack.
Yes.
It seems that our explosive device just takes out the entire reactor, and that was the intent of the operation.
Okay.
So that one attracted some attention from people saying, was this done to water down the game, to dilute the message? Was it like they were afraid that the characters wouldn't be appealing if they were full-blown terrorists? I'm of the opinion that it adds a lot more intrigue right up front, because you're kind of wondering, well, you're getting a lot more information very quickly about the Shinra company, and you're wondering, why exactly did they do that?
Yeah.
Some of the other stuff I'm not going to be able to talk about until later on in the remake, but that whole thing where it seems like Shinra's making that attack look much worse.
Yeah.
They do something really interesting with that, or at least they start to set up some interesting stuff. Again, we'll get to it later, that they were not able to do in the original game, that I think is a really interesting new thread that they kind of add on in Remake.
That is interesting.
Yeah, you can also see there the way that the track kind of displays that spiral, gives us a little bit of a better sense. Also, Jesse's very thoroughly explaining how the city is kind of structured right now, just to make sure that we got it. But we will still get we will get an FMV establishing shot of the slums in a second. Basically, the shot that I showed you from the teaser trailer at the ending of the bonuses a little bit ago.
That would drive me nuts if you had to deal with this, like, to and from work every day. It just starts flashing and beeping.
Hey man, it's about public security. Do you want the terrorists to win, Joey?
It's about...
These terrorists, yeah. They're really cool.
Yeah, that's true. I lost...
They're also plucky and pretty looking.
They have red...
Don't act so damn big, Barry.
I'm seeing stars. This sucks. I hate the dark.
It's probably because those flashing lights. They're gonna give some epileptic seizures.
Next time I'll give you one I made myself. Sure thing, Jesse. Okay. I'll put a little extra effort and make it with a bang.
No.
Look, you can see the surface now. This city don't have no night or day. If plate weren't there, you could see the sky. So like I said, in this game, there's not really any sense of the progression of time when you're in the Undercity.
Yeah.
But once you're rendering it all out in 3D space, it's like, oh, actually, you kind of would, you'd be able to tell if the sun was up. But it works very well here. It's very moody. You just full of surprises.
For some
Love
reason,
it.
my brain tried to make that jest. You jest full of surprise.
Surely you just...
The upper world, the city on the plate, it's because of that effing pizza that people underneath are suffering.
Perfect.
There it is.
And the city below is full of polluted air. The best thing is that this game is inconsistent about when it does and doesn't censor swear words. It never says the F word because it's T-rated, but they'll say shit sometimes. Then sometimes they'll say shit with an apostrophe in the middle of it for some reason. Why doesn't everybody move to the plate? Dunno, probably because they ain't got no money. Or maybe because they love their land no matter how polluted it gets. It's called denial, Barrett.
Yeah.
I know, no one lives in the slums.
Come on.
And, Cloud?
Come on.
He's a gigabrain Chad because they want to. Kept us in suspense there.
I see. So is that not you, like, pressing the button to progress
That is
it?
pressing the button, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I've recorded this 2 years ago. Did I get distracted or do that for a joke? I couldn't tell you.
Oh, okay.
It's like this train. It can only go where the rails take it.
There?
So yeah, that's you know, basically the exchange that we saw a couple episodes ago, just
Yes.
translated a little bit less blunt force trauma. Yeah, there you go. See the train on the exterior of the pillar? And
So grimy. I love it.
Yeah.
oh yeah, miserable. Miserable. I love this dude jive walking out of there. The way his feet go out like that.
It's so good.
That's the SpongeBob Lost episode walk cycles.
It is. They're doing so much with so little with that, and I love it. That guy's a cool dude because he's got sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
It's because his future's so bright.
Get over here, y'all.
All ya. Not y'all.
Oh, did I say all y'all?
All ya.
All yeah. Okay.
All ya.
I just assumed. Spending too much time in the
Who
South.
dyslexed it this time?
Yeah. Hey, listen, I've never once claimed that I'm good at reading stuff out loud in YouTube videos. This mission was a success, but don't get lazy now. Hard part's still to come. Don't y'all be scared of that explosion.
Wow.
Because the next one's gonna be bigger than that.
Okay, Barrett.
Hey, listen. We may have blown a big thing up, but nobody got hurt. Well, I mean, maybe some people got hurt, but nobody we knew.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
nobody that we care about.
People meeting, parting, joy, and sadness, after a while, it doesn't get to you anymore, being a train attendant. I wonder how long it's been the invisible rail between me and the passengers. I can never live their lives. I'm just a train man, plain and simple. It's easier that way.
That's amazing.
That's not to say that the crossing gate of my heart doesn't hurt now and again.
Oh my god.
Back during the war, I remember there were a lot of painful scenes
Oh man.
then. But that's a story for another day.
When's he getting a spinoff?
First lane train leaves for Midgar at 5:04 a.m. Why 5:04?
I was just about to say that's
Maybe it takes 14 minutes to get there at 6.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
16.
Isn't there somewhere we could go to be alone? Wow! There's only the train graveyard around here, and they say there's ghosts around.
Damn.
What? not letting you go tonight. Wow!
Top-notch dialogue right there. Wonderful interactions.
But yeah, that train attendant is a pretty good example of like that's obviously that is a a hidden little comedy sequence for anybody who cares to go look for it. Exactly that type of stuff is tucked away all over the place in these games. And here's another establishing shot. Since we can't turn the camera up, they add this in here to give us a look at the support strut. We saw earlier Cloud walked up to a guy, and we looked up at the support strut, and then Cloud was tweaking out a little bit, and the guy called him a Mako junkie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if they just have like lollipops that are just Mako on sticks.
Who knows? I think that's materia. This is my place, but you can come too when you want. Bye, bro. Later, chump. I think we are to assume that was Barrett shooting his gun arm off to clear people out of the bar.
Oh my god.
No, those are children right there, aren't they?
No,
those
Barrett.
models?
I think maybe,
Or
but
at
Barrett
least
is
there's one
just bigger
right
than
there.
all of them.
Hard to say for sure. If you caught it, you can barely see Tifa come out onto the balcony there and bow in the direction of the patrons who were run off, going, "Sorry, gomenasai," and then running back inside.
Sorry, everybody.
Oh god.
Oh, geez, I'm Blitz. I just love them homemade cocktails, but they sure do creep up on you. Oh, Jesus, what the hell's wrong tonight? I thought that long blackout was strange. They say a Mako reactor was destroyed above. I was just sitting here drinking and watching the news, and all of a sudden I get kicked out of the effing store.
Oh my gosh.
By the way, that guy who's talking about getting blitzed with kind of red hair, who's kind of coiffed up, remember that guy.
I love like old game like gorging yourself animation.
Absolutely.
They're so good.
Something about the tiny child in this one, not so much in the more recent version, but in this one, reminds me of oh, I can't think of her name. The small Shane's like small relative in Stardew Valley.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
Is
know
it
what you're
like
talking about.
Jasmine or Yaz maybe?
I think it's Jasmine. I think you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of these days I'll play Stardew Valley.
It's good.
You should.
I won't say
That is the one game that I'm like, I can talk about this for days. I have the
I have a lot of
lore.
friends like that too. I'm just kind of waiting for them to like start a playthrough of it and be like, "Hey, join us."
I will start a playthrough of it just for you.
Hell yeah.
So right there, instead of just giving the flower to Tifa as happens in the remake, you are given the option of presenting it to Tifa or Marlene.
Oh, how sweet!
I'm not interested in your stories. Tifa always lets me taste her cooking, and now look at me, I'm roly-poly. I don't know whether I should be happy or sad.
I don't know if we should. I think we've discussed worse on the channel. Actually, I literally within the last 24 hours have learned that the term roly-poly is now related to drugs.
What?
Yep.
How so?
Because roly-poly-oly, I mean, look at that guy. He must be on drugs.
I'm not sure why. I just within the last 24 hours have learned that you no longer take Molly, you go roly-poly.
Jeez. Okay, sure.
Neat.
Whatever.
Oh.
Need me some of that. Make me roll up in a ball.
Need
Start
some of that.
rolling around.
Gotta get me that Fortnite battle
Gotta
pass.
get me that Sonic hit. Let me spin dash around.
It is particularly common in like the rave scene. So like while people are still referring to it as Molly, if you go to like an EDM festival or something, they're going to be calling it roly-poly.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well,
but
since
it's-
Daft
it's
Punk is
more
broken up, I'm
words.
never gonna have to go to an EDM
Yeah,
festival,
learn
so
that-
it won't be my problem.
Learned that last night because somebody said something about roly-poly and I was like, bugs?
We're back.
We're doing bugs now? Like,
A little snack made of bugs. Perhaps a bug snack.
Oh, God. Please stop. Anyway, we're back in the present now. We're now several years removed from the release of Bug Snacks, and we don't need to talk about that crap.
I feel like this is a
25
video I'm gonna be shown later.
25. No, it's just a video game from a couple years ago.
Okay.
25 years in the future, baby. Standing in the exact same spot with the exact same characters. But anyway, that's our trip back to the past.
That's our trip through memory lane.
We may return to a few things from the original game here and there, and I will definitely stop and highlight like some music and a few features every now and then. But for the most part, back to our regularly scheduled remake.